Well, we want to jump into Hinduism today. Hinduism. Hinduism. So, some background on Hinduism, which I put up here, estimated that 13% of the world's population adheres that, and we're going to pray about it before we start, and maybe we'll end with prayer at the end. Today we're going to slide a little bit farther over into the idea, where does Christianity touch into it, and how do we address it in our own understanding and beliefs, and what do we do with it? Hopefully. How many of you have ever had a person who practices Hinduism as a personal friend? Okay. How many of you are familiar with the Transcendental Meditation movement? Okay, down at Fairfield, Iowa. I was reminded today, as I was up reading all this early, again, that the Maharishi Yogi came to Fairfield for a really big gathering. At that time, this was in the 80s. They had purchased the Parsons College, and they were expanding the school and making it into a school of business. Is a primary. The thought process is if you can elevate yourself to a place where you're really in focus, it improves your ability to be a successful business person. That's kind of one of the main entry levels of Fairfield, the school that's there today. And I was pastoring at Fairfield at that particular time, as well as Pleasant Plain, and we had the opportunity to try to deal with the huge influx of people coming from all around the world. And the Maharishi came for a grand visit. Now, this is kind of funny, but it wasn't for him. He arrived right after Christmas, and we were having one of the worst cold snaps we'd had in a long, long time in Iowa, and he got pneumonia. Because, you know, they don't wear shoe coverings or such like we do. And they always remember they had a little coverage on that as they got off the airplane. It was below zero, and it was quite a shock. And I think he said something about never coming back. So that was his kind of a rude introduction to Iowa weather. Let's pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, we understand that we come before you at all times, seeking your understanding, your knowledge, and your guidance as we discuss all people of the world. It says we're all made in an image. And so, Lord, we recognize that we're all humans in the same universe. So we don't want to be demeaning, yet we want to understand. And we ask, Lord, your guidance in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. The majority of the people that practice Hinduism live in India. More than 2 million Hindus live on the Indonesian island of Bali. I threw that in there, although the country of Indonesia as a whole is predominantly Muslim. And Nepal is the only nation where Hinduism is the state religion. There are more than 1 million Hindus in North America. Now, these statistics, I put these on here, are approximately 20 years old. And since those were written, we've added another billion people to the whole world in the last 20 years. We just went over 8 billion very recently. Now this, I'm taking these from two different texts. What did I do with the second one? Um, and it talks about how we are, we're understanding that it's polytheistic and ritualistic religion. Eventually, it became increasingly complex, so it deemed necessary to start writing down their beliefs. Hinduism can, in some people's ancient writings or in understandings, can be traced back 6,000 to 8,000 years BCE, according to tradition. It wasn't until about 1500 BC, or BCE, as it is looked at today, that they began to write down their rules, and they were called the Vedas. This is when the Vedas were written to give the priests instructions as how to perform the rituals. Finally, around 600 BC, the people revolted and began to emphasize the importance of internal meditation as opposed to external rituals. It was very ritualistic before, and understand, like many other religions of the world, including Jewish, a lot of this was oral tradition until it started to be written down, passed down through centuries orally. Between 800 I want to back up one other thought here, that 600 BC is about the same time the Jewish people had been carried off into Nineveh and then into Babylon. So there are similarities in time-wise that we can look at. It was during that period, about 800 to 300 BC, the Upanishads were written. The Upanishads are called Vedanta, the end of conclusion of the Vedas. So they had these Vedas rules being written down for several hundreds of years, and then they finally wrote down what they called the Upanishads, which is equivalent in some regards to like the New Testament time period in the Christian Bible. They expanded the idea that behind the many gods stands one reality, which is Brahman. Brahman is an impersonal, monistic, all-is-one force. And I want to jump over here and talk a little bit about this verbally, if I can, because I reread all this again this morning early. It just gives you some perspective. I'm going to throw some Hindu terms, and I probably won't pronounce them correctly. The oldest of the known Vedic scriptures, and among the oldest of the world's existing scriptures, is the Rig Veda. This praises and implores the blessings of the devas, the controlling forces in the cosmos. They are the deities who consecrate every part of life. The major devas, including the Indra, the god of thunder and bringer of welcome rains, Agni, god of fire, and Soma, associated with the sacred drink Soma, and the Ushas, goddess of dawn. I'm giving you this intentionally. The devas included both opaque earth gods and transparent deities of the sky. Let me jump down. The other ancient texts, including the Brahmanas, directions about performance of the ritual sacrifices of the deities. We can find some comparisons here, but coming down to one major thought. The Ishvara became personified even further through the 10 mythical incarnations of Vishnu called avatars. You ever heard that phrase? Yeah. They just made another one. Something very interesting about the Avatar movies. What is the purpose of the Avatar as depicted in the movies that we have seen? Anybody?
Their body could be like in Avatar, the cat people say. I mean, they could become one with them.
What color are the avatars in the movies? Blue. According to Krishna, probably blue is the color of the avatar from ancient times. What intrigues me about that is we went to a movie here recently called The Chosen, about Christ, the latest series. And I was just thinking, there were 3 of us in the theater that watched the 3 hours worth. But when they come out with a new Avatar movie, how many people go to the movie? 3 million, billion, all over the world. Avatars have a very distinct purpose in the Hindu religion. The Ishvara became personified even further through the 10 mythical incarnations of Vishnu. When you really look into this, the avatar is sent by Vishnu when there is terrible strife in the world and it gets so bad that it looks like something needs to intervene to give some sort of help to civilization. And according to tradition, there have been 10 avatars. They are incarnated at a critical time to bring some peace to the world. I want to read this next sec. The forms of these incarnations include that of animals, for example, a fish, a tortoise, and a boar, and of persons, for example, of Rama, Krishna, and Buddha. We're going to look at Buddha next week. Beyond the principal deities of a Trimurti and the avatars, it is estimated there are 330 million other gods in Hinduism. That's pretty basic. I mean, if you look up this textbook, it tells you that, and you look in this textbook, it tells you that as well, written by different people. So, besides the religion's various concepts of God, Hinduism can also be divided along the lines of whether the physical universe is considered to be real or illusory. I remember trying to understand some comments I'd heard a long, long time ago, back before I was maybe even adult, I don't know, in high school, but something or another. But anyway, how do we know this is real? I mean, this is real. We see it, we touch it, we think this is real. But some people in philosophy would talk about, well, maybe, how do we know it's real? I always remember that it being said to me by a teacher one time in class. I thought, huh? But in some regards, the ancient civilizations have been asking that question for thousands of years. There's even a name for it. The universe is considered to be real or illusory, or Maya. The beliefs of the Hinduism today, the impersonal nature of Brahman. It's an imperson. It is a monistic. Not a monotheistic, but a monistic. Monistic means it's all kinds, and it's into a oneness. But there's no real manifestation. I thought I better make sure I'm saying some of these things right, because I have not met and tried to have a relationship with many Hindus. I do remember being in the Memphis airport many years ago, and this goes back to my opening remarks last week. We'd had flight delays, cancellations, and there were people milling around and tired, and I came across somebody that was sitting off the side. It was an older lady, an older Hindu lady, and she was in an absolute state of panic. And she could only speak Hindi, and I traveled enough to have some idea what maybe she was trying to say, but no one understood her. And my heart just went out to her. She was in a state of panic. And finally, I got up from my seat and went over and started asking people there at the Memphis airport, Is there somebody that can find someone that can speak this language and help this poor lady? And we were able to find someone. Finally, somebody said, well, there's somebody down in another section, and they left, and they came back in a little while, and there was a gentleman who was an American, but of a Indian descent, you could tell, and he could speak enough Hindi that he was able to help her. I say that because it was so important, and it impacted me that she was in a state of panic, and she needed help. Now, some people would and could and probably do just dismiss them as unimportant. But boy, that isn't the way it hit me. And I think we have to be understanding and try to be human and peaceable wherever we're at and with whomever we happen to be talking to. Brahman is an impersonal religion. It's page, it says 88. The impersonal nature of Brahman. Hindus see ultimate reality, Brahman, as being an impersonal oneness that is beyond all distinctions, including personal and moral distinctions. Since Hindus are considered Brahman to be an impersonal force of existence, the universe is seen by most Hindus as being continuous with and extended from the being of Brahman. That's the ultimate. Most adherents of Hinduism believe that they are in their true selves Atman, extended from and one with the Brahman, just as the air inside an open jar is identical to the air surrounding the jar, so our essence is identical to that of essence of Brahman. Brahman and Atman unity. We come from the same thing, we are the same thing. And it's not like there's a personal relationship to Brahman. What's the law of karma? Anybody? What's karma?
Yeah, well, if you do something nasty, it'll come back some.
Okay.
Or good. You know, it could be good or bad.
Oh, yes. I mean, there's a purpose of karma. Jim, you were going to say something. No?
I'll have to admit, I don't understand what you're talking about with Brahman, even though I've had world religion in college. I don't understand what you're saying about Brahman and Atman and all that.
I'm throwing a lot of...
Maybe that isn't important.
Well, probably not, but I'm trying to give you some understanding of some of this language that perhaps you might come in contact with or be able to explain to someone else. Karma, some describe it here as it's kind of like a dust particle that it attaches to your soul, and depending on how you live, whether it's positive or negative, and it accumulates. And this dust, I'm going to show you something else here in a little bit, develops into and is very important to understand in the samsara, which is reincarnation. I know a single individual, highly educated person who has discarded his belief in Christianity and moved into the field of reincarnation because he has not been very happy with his life and all of the things that happened to him in his youth and his relationships and so on, and he's hopeful now that he's believing in reincarnation, that in his next life he'll have a better chance to having a better life. And he's a Quaker. Okay? I still know this gentleman, and we still converse. But it is so common in our world or universe language today, we all use that term. You hear it in all kinds of places all the time. Karma. Well, karma will get you, good or bad. Samsara is the whole cycle of reincarnation. The theory there is that you will reincarnated depends upon how much karma or negative dust you have picked up along the way, whether you are lowered in your reincarnation or elevated in your reincarnation. There's another Hindu word, moksha, which means liberation. I'm going to show you a picture in a little bit. The goal of enlightenment is for the individual self to lose its separate identity in the universal self. You can be elevated eventually to the point where you become nothing. I mean, you have no memory, you have no, it's moksha. And it's part of the samsara wheel. I'll show you a picture of it. The goal of enlightenment is for the individual self to lose its separate identity in the universal self. The end result of biblical salvation, on the other hand, is to an everlasting relationship with God. That's distinctively different. There's another term that we use and we've heard, nirvana. It's equivalent to moksha, but nirvana is more Buddhist. Literally means in Hindu, blowing out or cease to exist. So there's no negative or positive, you just cease to exist. So there's no thought, process, memory, so on and so forth. It is used to refer to the extinction of desire, hatred, and ignorance, and ultimately of suffering and rebirth. We are locked into this circle of life-death until we reach a level of total, absolute selflessness. This is a depiction of the wheel as part of the Hindu faith, and of the Buddhist faith, and of the Sikhs, and of the Jainists. You ever heard of the Jainism? A few people have. This wheel is like you're on this wheel, and it continues until you reach a point or a level of where you're totally extinguished in your thoughts, memories, everything. You're just gone. Nothing to think about, nothing to worry about. You just never existed. Okay? An offshoot of Hinduism is Jainism. Nonviolence is a central principle of Jainism. Jainism, principle of non-absolutism, because truth has many aspects. There are many truths, many pathways to God. Have you ever heard anything like that? There are many ways, many truths, and whatever works for you is good for you, but it may not be the right one for me. Okay? Jina, there's different levels of it. Ascetic, austere, detached from worldly comforts in the Jainist, which is a very small offshoot, 4.5 million or so in the world, but it gets really extreme at some places. One high order wears no clothes. Jina is a fully perfected human. Jiva, the soul. Karma, this is the subtle matter or particles that accumulate on the soul as a result of one's thoughts and action. And samsara, again, is that continual round of birth, death, and rebirth. I don't understand if it's supposed to mean that we are aware of it. But there are a lot of people that adhere and practice this. And it doesn't mean they're mean and bad, but this is what they've learned their whole lives. Same of us as if we were raised in the understanding of Christianity. I wanted to do a little bit of contrasting today. And what's some of the karma in Hinduism does not affect one's relationship with Brahman, which is the essence of existence within all things, whether one's karma is good or bad. Makes no difference to the fact that we are unconditionally extended from the oneness of Brahman. Sin in Christian does affect our relationship with God in that we become alienated from Him, separated from Him. One of the attributes of God is absolute moral holiness. And our sin reveals an attitude of rebellion against His moral authority. There's a contrast. That's one of the things I want to look at today. Some people would say this Hinduism looks a lot easier. You know. And we can adopt part of that. The part that we like about it, we adopt some of that. We can adopt some of the Christian ideas, and we can adopt some of the maybe Islamic ideas to make up something that we're comfortable with. Hinduism there's some contrasts here in this book that I like. Hinduism is impersonal. Christianity is personal. Humanity, continuous in the sense of being extended from the being of God, that's Hinduism. But Christianity, discontinuous in the sense of being separate from the being of God, continuous in the sense of being made in God's image. That's something that we would underscore. Made in God's image. Humanity's problem? Ignorance. I mean, some people would trace the lineage of Hinduism maybe back through, how big is that on that screen? Not very big. Every time I tried to blow that up, it got blurry, and I couldn't read it. All those different colors indicate different religions. One of those is Zoroastrianism, which is in northern Iran. It's a very small religious faith. They're trying to understand where did all these religions come from in the first place. One of the things that has caused me to have pause when I was reading of these religions a few years ago and studying them is somebody would say, well, it's not in the Bible, then it doesn't exist. Well, now wait a minute. Where did Abraham come from? His mother. What part of the world? Mideast. Not along the Mediterranean. He was farther east, a little bit north, what is now northern India. And it says that his father worshiped God, and his father had influence on Abraham. And Abraham heard from God and was told to pack up his belongings and take his family with him and go to another place. I began to muse in my own mind, like, God has been revealing himself for a long time to humanity. It says in Romans 1 and 2 that you can know God, or you've been able to know God through nature. That doesn't mean you worship nature. I mean, you could find all kinds of people around the world who worshiped a rock or a river or a sea or the sun, you know, all kinds of things. Go to Central America, you find a lot of sun worship. But we all somehow or another are supposed to be tuning in and listening to God. I guess I say that because it made me stop and think, maybe I shouldn't assume nobody else knows anything about God except me. Now, we profess and we practice that God has revealed himself. And eventually, through Christ, his Son. And he offered himself as a salvation to all who believe. There are many other religions in this world that people practice, and they live and they die practicing those religious faiths. This gets complicated in my mind. Yet, out of all of this, myriad of religions, we see how God jumped into human history. I don't want to pick on anybody in here, but the Jewish faith goes back, and there's a quote in this textbook, it's been a continuous written faith for 4,000 years. Since after Abraham. So it's an ancient religion. God has been working and revealing himself for a long, long time. Now it says in the scriptures, and we believe by personal faith, that Jesus Christ came as that perfect sacrifice to help us have a relationship. It isn't a matter of just worshiping 330 million different gods. I mean, there's some are known as the kitchen god. That's one of them that I read about a number of times. And you can worship, and that kitchen god is given sacrifices or in the corner of the kitchen. I think a lot of times we kind of adapt to something that we want to believe in, and it helps us to understand our purpose in life. You see that? What color is that right in the middle where India is? See, I'm colorblind. Yeah. Magenta. All right. So that's basically India. When you study history, you look at some point after 600 AD or CE, whatever you want to call it today, you know, when the Islamic movement was moving forward, they ended up over in Pakistan, and there were already people there in the Indus Valley, and they were probably practicing their Hindu faith. And now you have today, Pakistan is primarily Muslim and is a place of a great deal of violence again. But you also have in northern India, you have the Nepal, and we could speak about that a little bit better. Some of you started this question with Bangladesh to me when the Adhikaris were here speaking. There's Muslim and Hindu there. How do we deal with that in our own mind? And we try to make the world all up in our own little picture. And that's the part that I struggle with and want to find answers for in my own life. Jesus Christ comes in the form of a man. You explain to me, fully God and fully man. Somebody explain that to me. But that's what he's described as. And if you know and have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, you do seem to have a peace that passes all understanding, as the Bible tells us, is available to us. Jesus Christ, as revealed through the New Testament, has a plan if we will follow and listen to it. I suggest that we need to make sure that we understand that Jesus offered forgiveness, not a continuous cycle of birth and death, but forgiveness. Keep God's personhood in mind. We need to be conforming to Christ through his revealed word and through the Holy Spirit. We should be able to ask and listen. Have a humble spirit. Focus on Jesus. Beware of differing definitions. We are influenced, whether we realize it or not, by these other definitions. They're around us all the time. How do we incorporate or stand against it? We have cultural barriers. If I was born into a Hindu family and raised to believe that entirely, it is very difficult for me to change from that. Sometimes I get the idea that we think that, well, because we know the truth, all the rest of you need to jump on board with me. But that's really tough when you're going against a family tradition. We need God's help. Not to embrace what everybody else believes. Can I pick on you a minute, Sophia? Your faith is based upon, Sophia's from Brazil. And what is the main faith in Brazil? Catholicism. But do you practice that? You did. And today, you are here with us. And you're bringing, you can and do bring a level of light to some of us who are willing to get to know you and listen. Not everybody thinks exactly like I do, but yet God is in Brazil. He isn't just in Iowa, okay? And we can relate to and grow in our faith by knowing people from other parts of the world. So you're more of a Protestant faith today. Yeah. By the way, thank you for getting up and coming.
One of the cultural barriers, especially in India, is under the banner of Christianity, England went in and conquered them and controlled them for quite a period of time. And missionaries went, and there's a certain segment of India that are Christians, not a large number, but in recent years now, the government is oppressing other religions other than Hindus, not just Christians, but some of these others that you mentioned.
Right.
And a lot of that's a kickback to the fact that, Christianity represents armies that came in and conquered us. And
England, to be specific.
English.
They colonized India.
That's right. And sometimes historical events like that make it really difficult to share Christianity.
And you are correct in that just in the last 5 years, they've been making stricter laws against other faiths, including Christianity. We have a lot of friends' churches in India, Nepal, Bangladesh, because we have missionaries that have gone over there. But it is not easy. The actual dates are British rule of India, 1857 to 1947. There was no word Hindu until the British came. That was a term that the British adopted and placed on the religions in India. They followed the Veda rules and laws. So they were very much influenced by colonialism and Mahatma Gandhi. Now, some people hold Mr. Gandhi up to being way up there, okay? My reading of that man historically was he was looking into Christianity and had a very unfortunate incident on a train coming up from South Africa with some Christians that turned him off against the whole idea of Christianity. So part of that I take from that is we never really know what kind of influence we're having, perhaps, but we need to be kind. I don't think I see anywhere in Christian teachings that it says we should be brutal and uncaring. We're supposed to love one another if we're all created in God's image. And we may win someone to our faith. There have been other people there. I notice in this book and this book both come back to the reference of one particular man, Life of Ramakrishna is his name, and he's highlighted as a person who really brought strength back to the Hindu religion. So we have cultural barriers, but in a lot of places we teach there are many pathways to God. And you can hear that right here in this neighborhood if you wanted to. If you want to inquire and you want to listen, you can find it. How we live will have influence on other people. How we treat others has an influence on other people. Why do I believe what I do? Because Christ within me. Jesus Christ is not unique. This is one of the phrases. The Hindus see their gods and avatars as incarnations, as manifestations of the impersonal Brahman. They view Jesus as merely one of those avatars. I tell you this so that if you ever get into a conversation with someone, or maybe one of your children goes off to college and comes home and says, "Hey, I've changed. I want to follow this." Your Hindu friends might be willing to incorporate Jesus into his or her pantheon of millions, but he or she will be unwilling to accept Jesus as the exclusive incarnation of God. They might even say, I must pay for my own karmic debt. I mean, that's what I've been told and I have believed since I can remember. And in the Jainism particularly, Jainists have a reputation. I mean, they're so extreme in their practice that oftentimes their priests would walk with their heads down because they don't want to step on a worm or a bug, because it might be, could be. They're very extreme in that. But it's still alive in India and probably in places here in America. I don't plan to even hit into the Sikhs who have their form of Hinduism that they practice and oftentimes are at war with the Hindus of India. In northern India is a place where the Sikhs live. Why do the Chinese who practice communism or Confucianism or Buddhism? And Buddhism and Confucianism, religious beliefs, has filtered throughout China, Korea, Japan. In Japan, they practice Shintoism, but it has incorporated parts of all those other religions. In the whole Asian part of the hemisphere. My hope is we're trying to broaden our understanding. Anybody have any questions? Yes, Kathy.
I'm getting the impression from what you have said that there's really no personal relationship between the Hindu and their gods. So is this more, do they view their gods as more or less oppressive? If I don't keep the gods pacified, then trouble will follow? Or do they even have a concept? Do they call them gods, little g gods? Do they call them gods? Do they have a concept of a god? And is that God oppressive, or is that God, I don't know what the word I want to use, the opposite of oppressive?
But to me, the key word is a personal relationship. No, I don't think they do, because God is impersonal. Because they're not talking about God. They're talking about the elements of their faith, of their religion. And this whole idea of karma and reincarnation is really big as to what we might have accomplished in life or that's negative and caused us greater harm. Yes?
Do you have any idea how old this karma idea is in their faith or religion?
Well,
Mess that around, because we use it as though it basically means nothing as far as a religion. And
I
so
think you're right.
We're appropriating somebody else's religious word and
That's
not
right.
knowing that we're using a Hinduism
That's right.
thought. And that seems really bad to me.
Well,
You should never say that.
innocently, we've adopted it because our language has incorporated it because it is used so much.
Right, but words have meanings.
Yeah.
There are meanings attached to words.
Yep.
And whether you know the meaning or not does not mean that that's not what you're doing.
And a lot of people, the reincarnation idea sounds a lot easier than having to change my life.
But do you know how
Well, it goes back a few thousand years. Great question. What other things have we adopted? Reincarnation is one of them. That's maybe a lot easier than a personal faith in a living God. I'll take my chances. It's kind of an attitude. And maybe the next time around I'll get a better shot at it. But if I don't have to worry about this for many eons, then I just continue to evolve, hopefully, upwards rather than downwards.
So the sacredness of the cow, where is
That, well, I think it goes back, I don't know exactly, but the whole idea that you really shouldn't kill anything. Brahman? Where do we get the name of a Brahma bull? Well, it looks like the Brahmins in India, the big hump on the back and somehow or another. I don't know. That's a great question, and I have not specifically taken a look at the cow. But part of their faith is to bathe in the Ganges River, right? Where all the waste is dumped. And it is risky, to say the least. They also have other practices, I don't know, of burning their, off a pyre of wood, and what doesn't burn goes right on into the river. Is that where we get the idea that cremation is wrong? I had a lady come to me in my office one time and told me I needed to look in the Bible and find out where it is forbidden to be cremated. Because her dear closest friend had told her she intended to be cremated, and she was so upset. She wanted me to find how she could find a reasoning from the Bible. I ran into a problem. I couldn't find anything that said that was a bad idea. I couldn't find anything.
You're putting formaldehyde and everything in the body, so who says that that's okay?
Right?
We're supposed to return back to dust, so it seems more like cremation would be more like what you should do than trying to keep your body for
I think a lot.
hundreds of years buried.
Trying to preserve. That's what we try to do, right? Steve, help me out. You got any ideas here on this stuff? There are some, they're not large, but there are some localized religions that would bury their parents in the kitchen floor. And they unearth them every so often and bring them back and offer them food. You know, there are all kinds of practices, local or other. One of them that struck me so strongly was if you're born an albino, or as I said in Tanzania, albino. Those were people were very wrong. And that the witchcraft practice would be to dismember them and to utilize parts of their body as some sort of power. And I remember that because I'd read that and I understood that. And as I was driving out of Kiela, Tanzania, I saw a little albino child peeking through the curtains out a window as we drove by. And it made me sick, more or less just sick, because oh my gosh. So there are all kinds of practices around the world. And sometimes I get the idea that we think that we're just so much better than everybody else. And that sends off such a terribly negative connotation to somebody if you're trying to witness to them. We don't have to adopt their practices, but we offer something better through the scriptures and through God. It's about time for us to be done today.
Well, the caste system, that's still
The caste?
caste, yes. I'm just kind of curious about that.
I didn't really delve into that, but yes, it still exists. They're trying to change that. They're trying to change laws. You're born into the lowest system. You'll stay there the rest of your life. And they can be slaves, or you can abuse them. You can do whatever. That I don't know how that started, but in some of the big cities, I'm sure you can still find the caste system. I don't know how many different castes there are. I maybe knew that at some time in the past, but I haven't been studying that. You just don't want to be born in the bottom one. What was the movie? What movie? got all kinds of Academy Awards and everything a few years back. It was made in India. The lowest caste system cleaned the bathrooms. Yeah. The unclean. The unclean. Have they? What's the difference between that and the leprosy in Jesus' day? And it's still here too. Leprosy is still here. Okay, we should quit. I applaud you. This morning at 6 a.m. I was emailing a friend of mine named John Maru, who's spoken here before. He's from Turkana, and he was telling me about a car wreck he'd been in. And I was just thinking, we have such a wonderful world today. We were exchanging ideas at 6 a.m. this morning and sharing our faith